In the shifting shadows of Port Charles, secrets never stay buried for long, and on a sweltering Tuesday, that truth emerged with merciless precision. What began as a day of preparation and reflection erupted into confrontations, revelations, and unexpected reckonings that would ripple through lives and legacies. At the heart of it all stood Portia, no longer willing to protect a truth that could unravel everything. Portia had been holding back for weeks, torn between her professional oath and personal morality. But something within her cracked wide open, perhaps guilt, or perhaps the realization that Willow, radiant and trusting, was walking blindly into a future with a man who had crossed ethical lines. That man, Drew, had not only coerced Portia into falsifying Michael's medical records, framing him as a drug addict to gain leverage, but had done so under the guise of protecting family. When Portia confessed this blackmail to Isaiah, she did so not for absolution but because the weight of silence was too heavy. Isaiah, ever perceptive, grasped the magnitude of her burden and gently advised her to walk away from the turmoil before it consumed her entirely. Still, Portia couldn't look away, not while Willow remained oblivious. She tried once more to pierce the veil. After handing Elizabeth a formal wedding invitation alongside Willow, Portia received one herself. But the moment she left Willow's presence, her resolve hardened. The invitation was crumpled and thrown away, an act of quiet defiance. She couldn't smile at a ceremony forged on manipulation. Her warning to Willow was blunt, unwavering. The man she was marrying was the same man who used her as a pawn in a game of political retribution. Willow, visibly shaken, had no response. The vision of her future cracked, revealing fault lines she could no longer ignore. Elsewhere, at the Home and Heart studio, Lois found herself cornered by a different kind of reckoning. Flora, sharp yet empathetic, pulled the truth from Lois like a thorn from flesh. Lois had spent years dodging the aftermath of the Geo ordeal, hoping time would soften Brooke Lynn's heart. But Flora saw through the facade. She gently reminded Lois that pain lingers until confronted, and that, eventually, Brooke Lynn would need her mother, whether either of them was ready for it. Lois, sensing the truth in Flora's words, made a bold decision. She would return to Bensonhurst, grant Brooke Lynn the space she so clearly craved, and wait, however long it took, for reconciliation. Brooke Lynn, meanwhile, stood at a strange crossroads of emotion. Working with Lois had, strangely, brought a sense of comfort, but comfort bred confusion, and confusion bred guilt. Her trust had once been broken by her mother, and though cooperation felt right, the memory of betrayal refused to loosen its grip. Tracy, ever opportunistic, was delighted to hear that Brooke Lynn had cut Lois out once again. For Tracy, victory over Lois wasn't just personal, it was strategic. She believed that severing emotional ties made one stronger, and for Brooke Lynn, strength was currency. At the Metro Court pool, Brooke Lynn reflected on this decision. The clarity she once sought from distancing herself from her mother now felt muddied. Working with Lois reminded her of what they'd once shared, yet that familiar ache, the one born of deceit, still simmered. The tug-of-war between forgiveness and resentment pulled at her relentlessly. Across town, in the cold corridors of the PCPD, Lucas filed a missing person report for Marco. His suspicions immediately turned towards Sonny, whose reputation preceded him. Yet Chase, ever the rational officer, reminded him that speculation wasn't proof. ADA Justine Turner, however, was less forgiving. She watched from the sidelines with a hawk's gaze and made her stance clear: this case wouldn't be buried in red tape or excuses. Marco's disappearance mattered. Sonny, meanwhile, was already maneuvering behind the scenes. His call with Sidwell was terse, transactional. The two men were dancing around an unspoken agreement. Favors traded like currency, vengeance delayed but not denied. After the call, Sonny turned his focus to Laura. He urged her, for her own political future, to distance herself from him. Though she protested, he insisted. The media's claws were sharp, and she had endured enough scrutiny. He hinted that the storm would soon pass, cryptic yet confident, leaving Laura with more questions than answers. That confidence was soon tested. ADA Turner summoned Sonny to the station, where she wasted no time accusing him of orchestrating Marco's abduction. Sunny, unbothered, smirked through the accusations, denying everything while daring her to take action. Turner didn't flinch. If Marco failed to appear within 24 hours, Sunny's immunity, real or perceived, would dissolve. At the hospital, Isaiah received a mysterious package for Lucas. Inside was a key and an address, no explanation. But in Port Charles, anonymous packages never meant safety, they meant someone was ready to pull another thread loose. At Drew's home, the air was thick with tension. Sidwell, flanked by Drew, Martin, and Jordan, delivered a bombshell. His financial support for Measure C was officially withdrawn. The campaign, already bleeding credibility, was now hemorrhaging funds. The move, he clarified, was less a retreat than a recalibration. Sunny had demanded Marco's return, and for now, Sidwell would comply. But vengeance? That would come later. Still, Drew wasn't without options. Sidwell floated Tracy's name as a possible financial savior. Martin agreed, Tracy could outspend Sunny if properly motivated. But convincing her was another matter. Brooke Lynn, overhearing the strategy, erupted. Taking down Sunny meant destabilizing Joe's fragile world, a risk she wasn't willing to accept. Tracy dismissed the protest. Eliminating Sunny, she claimed, was the best way to protect Gio from the chaos that always followed him. Jordan, who had been keeping Laura in the loop throughout the escalating power plays, was beginning to see Sunny and Sidwell as mirror images, men intoxicated by control, blinded by rivalry. The lines between protector and predator had blurred beyond recognition. Later, Martin returned to Drew's residence, weary but resigned. He agreed to attend the wedding, though his heart wasn't in it. As he moved through the room, his eyes caught on a letter, addressed to Monica. It was tucked in among children's scribbles, an odd mix of innocence and gravity. Drew brushed it off as scrap paper, a harmless accident, but Martin felt otherwise. After Drew departed, Martin sat down and began reading the letter aloud. The childlike scrawl masked deeper emotion. Dear Monica, I'm so sorry you're sick. I know you've been feeling down for a while. I've tried. The words trailed off into uncertainty, but Martin's brow furrowed. Something about the letter didn't feel accidental. It felt placed. Like a whisper from a child who had seen too much or understood too deeply. And so, another day in Port Charles drew to a close, not with resolution, but with shifting alliances and unraveling truths. Portia's conscience had shattered the illusion of Drew's integrity. Willow's certainty about her future had been shaken to its core. Sunny's shadow loomed over every corridor, while Martin began to question whether innocence had a place in the war zones they now inhabited. And somewhere in the city, a key and an address waited in silence, promising answers, or devastation, for those brave enough to turn the lock.